The morning our block smelled like wet grass and coffee, my neighbor dropped her smile in a hurry, and her diary slipped from the unzipped mouth of her leather tote. I watched it fall beside my roses as she speed-walked to her car, heels negotiating with the pavement the way liars negotiate with facts. I didn't call out. I had run out of charitable reminders months ago about the time rumors in her voice started sleeping in my house. I picked up the diary and felt its weight like a truth that had been doing push-ups. If what she wrote about me was anything like what she said about everyone else, the pages would be a map of harm. But before I tell you the rest of what happened, I'd love to know where you're watching from, your city or your country. I enjoy hearing that, because it reminds me that every home, no matter how far away, carries its own stories too. Our street pretends to be gentle. It puts on hydrangeas and painted mailboxes as if decoration could pass for character. The houses touch elbows. The morning sprinklers applause the same small ambitions. And that woman, my neighbor, waves like a weather vane, always in motion, always pointing at someone else. My husband had started speaking in careful half-sentences months ago. Maybe we should, at dinner. It would look better if, after church, he'd scroll the neighborhood blog, jaw tightening at the late-night whispers in the comments, the blurry photos of porch lights, the captions about community standards. You can plant a lie like a petunia if you have enough volunteers to water it. I set the diary on my kitchen table where the sun keeps the salt honest. The cover was soft black, the corners blunted by use. A gold initial on the front announced itself as if a letter could be a credential. I rinsed my hands as if truths could smudge, then opened it to the first page that mattered. Her handwriting was the kind that wins compliments. Round, tidy, the loops of someone who performs innocence. Monday, coffee with L at 8 a.m. New item, wife at number 24, seen with male visitor after 10 p.m. Silver sedan, partial plate, 7QJ. She had drawn a star. Next line, plant question at book club. Is she okay? Light on late, tired lately. Mention safety. She had written my life like a weather report. Observations, then light rain. The male visitor was my brother, driving the only car he's ever trusted, the one with the heater that sighs like a saint. He works night shifts. He stops when he can. Facts shrink under a certain kind of presentation. She understood that. She had turned kindness into evidence by removing the labels. Another page held a list titled Notes, Reputation. A column for names, another for entry point, and a third for result. Entry points included church foyer, coffee line, and group chat. For me, she had checked all three. The result column read, husband receptive to shame. The sentence sat there like an unwrapped knife. If I close my eyes, I can still hear the week our church foyer stopped feeling like home. The hand that used to squeeze mine in greeting turned to a tapped shoulder, followed by a glance, followed by a pause, long enough to suggest prayer. The choir director asked for discernment, in a tone usually reserved for budgets. My husband's mouth became a straight line that would not bend even for soup. I kept reading. There were money pages, columns, totals, and acronyms. FF, Funeral Flowers Fund. NB, Neighborhood Blog. Ad by, NB, followed by a figure. Then, sponsored content, safety. She had highlighted safety like a birthright. Line after line, envelopes, cash outs, asterisks. In the margin, a small note. MB Media discount for friends. She had made influence look like philanthropy by putting the right words in the right order. I took a photograph of that page with my phone because memory is not enough when other people write for a living. The next entry hit where it was intended. If wife at 24 resists, escalate with concern. We worry about you. Late nights aren't wise. Husband will want to avoid embarrassment. Offer him solutions. I could hear her voice in those commas. She makes concern an instrument, and she knows how to play. I closed the book and set my palm on it, the way you might steady a skittish animal. Through the window, I could see her car gone, the curb where she had hurried, the small scrape her heel left in the soft place by my roses. It is a strange thing to live next door to a person who knows how to turn ordinary days into ammunition. My husband came in from the garage with the look of a man who has chosen to eat his words for breakfast. A few of the guys said there was talk, he began, chewing the sentence to soften it. About the light in our bedroom. About visitors. My brother, I said. Who you love when he fixes the lawnmower. He looked away like forgiveness might be on the ceiling. It's not just that. It's how it looks. Maybe we should take some space while this settles. There are bruises you can see and bruises you can't, and both ache when the weather changes. If you need space, I said, folding a dish towel as if the shape of the square mattered. Take a walk. This is our house. He let the towel be a shield, then retreated to the garage where all things are fixable except the ones that matter. I reopened the diary and forced myself to keep the pace of a person who counts, not a person who flinches. Midway through, a section titled Calendar, Posts, and Push. Each week had 2 entries, teaser and bloom. On my week, the teaser read, silver sedan at odd hours, light on late, she looks tired angle. The bloom, caring neighbors ask if she's okay, husband protective, possible retreat. The word possible had been underlined, and in the margin she had drawn a small heart, which is what you do when you cannot bear to admit you enjoy breaking things. People think gossip is a circle, but it's a ladder. She had been climbing. I put a paperclip on that page, as if metal could hold behavior in place. My phone vibrated on the table with a message from a number I recognized too well. The neighborhood blog's alerts. New post. What do you do when a neighbor seems to be keeping secrets? Safety first. Share tips below. MB Media. I clicked, and there it was. A photo of my porch in tasteful grayscale, my own wind chime looking implicated, the caption, "We all want what's best." The comments had already begun, the gentle weapons of people who say bless your heart with their hands full of stones. I copied the link into a note titled Cages, then shut the diary again because you have to come up for air between rounds. I washed an apple until it shone and ate it in slices over the sink like a woman rehearsing how to taste again. A knock on the back door. She didn't wait for me to answer before calling, "Anyone home?" She wears friendliness like a borrowed sweater, cozy, not hers. "I'm here," I said, tightening my grip on the dish towel so I'd have something kinder than her to hold. She stepped in with a Tupperware and a performance. "I made a crumble," she announced, setting it down without permission. "You've seemed overwhelmed." "I worry." "I'm fine," I said, "and I don't take crumble from people who alphabetize sins." She laughed as if I'd told a joke, then placed her palms on the counter and leaned forward, the international pose of women who want to own your story. "I saw a car late," she murmured. "We care about safety. People talk. I don't want you hurt by assumptions." "You write the assumptions," I said. "It must be a relief to know how the story ends before it starts." She blinked, chastened for a blink, then recovered. "You know how people are." She slid the container toward me. "Eat, rest. Maybe it's time to simplify. Maybe it's time to edit," I said, and walked her to the door with my smile buttoned all the way up. When she was gone, I washed my hands again because some contaminations feel ceremonial. I pulled the diary back into the light and continued. "Coffee with MB," she had written. "Discuss safety series. Place sponsored post under community section. Align with calendar invites so it looks grassroots." There were dates, amounts, a doodle of a magnolia. In the back pocket, an envelope. Inside, a receipt. Cash deposit to MB Media for an ad buy. Memo line, flowers and safety. Amount circled. On the flip side, a list of names, mine underlined, with small notes next to each. Next to my name, marriage, tender point. If you are the kind of person who believes in mercy, you have to learn how to hold it alongside rage without letting either spill. I took photographs of every page that touched me like a thumb in a bruise. Then I called my brother. "Did you stop by late last week?" I asked. "Wednesday," he said. "You were asleep. I left the carburetor by the porch and texted him." "Why?" "Because your car is a phantasm and she made it a ghost." "Lock your doors," I added, not because of thieves, but because of stories. In the afternoon, I went to the coffee shop 2 blocks away where Public Intimacy performs for tips. I carry a face I save for field work, calm, open, a little tired. She was there, of course, at a corner table with a man who keeps his beard shaped like opinions. He runs the blog that teaches our neighborhood how to be anxious. Their heads were close, their smiles small. I ordered tea I didn't want and sat with my back to them, the way you sit with fire. I pretended to scroll while angling my camera low to take a picture of their reflection in the glass pastry case. You learn tricks when you're tired of being managed. While the milk steamed, he said, "Post at 5. Use the safer headline." She said, "The one about checking on neighbors?" He nodded. People click when they feel righteous. My tea was warm in my hand when I walked out, the cup a prop for an exit. I didn't look back because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is give a person your eyes. At home, my husband was in the living room pretending to repair a lamp that worked. "She dropped by," I said. "She brought sweetness." He stared at the lampshade. "She's just Involved. Involved is one word, I said. Invasive is another. He rubbed the crown of his head. Everyone wants the same thing, he began. No, I said, and I put the diary on the coffee table between us like a summons. Everyone wants their own thing. The trick is whether they want it out loud. He didn't open it. He went into the kitchen and started doing the dishes like penance, water hot enough to blur. There is a private temptation when you hold proof, the urge to throw it on the first table and burn it like incense. I have that temperament. Age has taught me to plate my fury. I made a list in my head for the next day. Call the bank my mother favored. Ask hypotheticals about tracing deposited sponsorships. Meet my friend who reads bylaws like romance. Check whether recording a public neighborhood meeting counts as documentation. You plan when you are done pleading. Late afternoon lights slanted into the dining room, turning dust into confetti. I set the diary in that light and read the page where she allowed herself adornment. People need stories, she wrote. If I can keep them safe by guiding the conversation, I'm doing what good neighbors do. Underneath, an arrow pointing to a second sentence. Sometimes, a nudge is necessary. The nudge was my marriage. I thought about the first time she moved in, how she had handed me a jar of jam with a label printed in a font that looked like sincerity. We should look out for each other, she'd said. I am still learning that we can mean I. My brother texted a photo from his phone, my porch light at 10:14 p.m., spilling gold over the step where he'd left the carburetor. This is the angle I shot when I sent the pic to him, he wrote, meaning my husband, to prove I didn't wake you. 2 minutes later, another text. You want me to come by? Not yet, I wrote. Soon. I took the crumble she had left and set it in the fridge because I am my mother's daughter, and we do not throw away food until it proves itself unworthy. In the evening, I ironed a blouse I wear when I want to look like a thesis, crisp, legible, supported by sources. I laid it over the back of a chair like a plan unfolding. My husband sat on the couch, the news murmuring about other people's transgressions. Maybe, he said, clearing his throat, maybe I should go to my brother's for a while. Maybe you should come to the meeting with me on Thursday, I answered. Maybe you should listen while the room decides how much truth it can tolerate. He didn't answer. The room did what rooms do at that hour. They tried on darkness and decided it fit. I am a woman of a certain age. I have learned not to argue with people who mistake volume for evidence. I set an alarm for an hour I reserve for renewed convictions. Then I placed the diary in a canvas tote and slid it under my bed the way you slide a fire extinguisher into a corner. There, ready, legitimate. Before sleep, I opened to the last page to see whether she ever wondered about the cost. In small, neat letters, she had written, "If someone gets hurt, it won't be my fault. I'm just passing along what I hear." The sentence was a shrug you wear like pearls. Sometimes the only revenge that makes sense is to leave a person alone with their own words. Morning would come with calls and visits and the dignified performance of correction. But that night, I allowed myself one indulgence. I stood at the sink in the dark, looking at the reflection of my kitchen window, and, beyond it, the square of her kitchen window a few feet away. In both panes, a woman stood thinking she was right. Only one of us had written it down. By morning, the diary had already rewritten my house. The kettle sounded like a witness clearing its throat, the blinds like a jury lifting their lashes, and my kitchen table had become a desk where consequences are stapled. I set a pen beside the diary, not because I planned edits, but because people respect pages more when they see ink nearby. The first section was labeled Index, which told me everything about her that kindness had failed to. She had an index to her neighbors. A's for assets, who had extra rooms, who drove new, who could sponsor. B's for behavior, who drank, who cried on Tuesdays, who bought wine in bulk every third Friday. C's for credibility, whether a person could carry a rumor across a room without dropping it. She had written, for me, C2, appears composed, shakes when alone, married to E, image conscious. The audacity of handwriting a stranger's inner life and calling it filing. I made coffee I barely wanted, then flipped to a page flagged with a square of floral tape. Strategy. Safety series. It read like a syllabus written by someone who had learned their ethics from advertisements. Step 1. Frame concern. Step 2. Provide anecdote. Step 3. Offer solution. Resource link. Step 4. Ask for shares. The resource link was always the same. The neighborhood blog with its brand new community safety masthead. The ads nestled between paragraphs like sponsors of virtue. She had added in the margin, place next to missing cat posts, softens edges. On the next page, the likable handwriting slipped and showed its teeth. Targets, it said, then a list of addresses. Next to mine, window light late, fatigue narrative, silver sedan, outsider narrative, porch packages, frivolity, church absences, and strain. The way she braided ordinary life into a rope could have been admired if it hadn't been meant for binding. I turned the page as if it might bite. A table waited, neat columns drawn with a ruler, funds and favors. She listed envelopes in, envelopes out, arrows toward initials I recognized from porch conversations and holiday banners, the same initials that wrote prayers in the bulletin. FF, flowers, condolence, NB, add by, GC, gift card, thank you Maud. Beside NB she had drawn a tiny camera, sponsored post, place under from the moderators to build trust. You can launder a lie by washing it with a word people already love. In the back pocket of the diary, I found the deposit slip I had felt yesterday with my fingertips, the one she had tucked like a secret addressed to her future self. White paper, blue lines, ink slightly smudged where the teller had pressed hard. MB Media, the line read under account name. Amount, not small. Memo, flowers and safety. I took a picture, then another with a ruler for scale because judges and men I have loved like things that can be measured. From the hallway, my husband asked, not unkindly, "Do you want toast?" The domestic question walked into a room that wasn't domestic anymore. "I want you to look," I said without raising my voice. I laid the slip on the table beside the page where my name wore its little underline like a bruise. "This is the money behind how you felt." He stood over the pages as if nearing a casket of someone he failed to visit. "It doesn't prove intent," he said softly, and then winced at how useful the sentence sounded. "It proves method," I said. "Intent confessed itself last night when she brought dessert for the funeral she'd planned." He sat. He didn't touch the diary. He put both hands on his knees like he was afraid to fingerprint the truth. I moved to the section labeled Network. Arrows linked names to venues. F, choir, Sunday, R, gym, weekday mornings, S, book club, Thursday, E, cafe, daily. She had circle-starred the cafe. Good sound carry, can stage chants. In smaller letters, like a favor she was only willing to do if it made her virtuous twice, she'd written, "Offer rides to Dr. Bacher's information." She had weaponized kindness with a clipboard smile. There was a draft post in her neat block script, "How to check on a neighbor with love." It began with a story about an older widow who hid her loneliness with lights and ended with a soft command, "We pass along what we see not to judge, but to protect." Between paragraphs, she had left blank spaces where I could see the ad modules would slide in, the way the tide fills cuts in sand. I could hear her voice reading it at a luncheon, the glassware clinking approval. "Don't applaud," the sentences wanted to say. "Forward." In the margin near my address, a notch of pencil. "Husband receptive, prefers quiet correction to scandal." The words were true in the way a knife is honest when it tells you what it is. I swallowed without sound. Knowing something about a person is different from taking custody of it. I flipped to a page clipped with a gold paperclip. Night Watch, it was called, which made me imagine a painting until I read the bullets. Lights on schedule, cars not usual, packages, voices. Under cars, the partial plate, my brother's. Under voices, male laugh, midweek. I remembered the night he'd told a joke about our mother's meatloaf and how the refrigerator had hummed like applause. She had translated intimacy into an index entry. There is a violence in that conversion. The phone buzzed with a new alert from the blog. Tonight, community Q&A with NB editors about safety content. Bring questions. A public relations event disguised as listening. My anger kept its coat on and sat down. I turned to the last third of the book, where notebooks usually grow sloppy, not hers. Contingencies, the tab read. If challenged, use phrases. We worry. Best interest. Community standards. I heard. It may be nothing. Deflect to blog policy. If legal, I'm merely a conduit. She had underlined conduit twice. She believed she was a river carrying other people's water. She had not noticed she was also the dam that chose where the flood went. I set the pen on that word and pressed until the point left a dot through the paper onto the table underneath. Then I breathed, because forgetting to breathe is a hobby of the humiliated. There were personal pages. She had kept a ledger of her body, calories, steps, compliments, next to a ledger of mine. Wife at 24, hair grayer lately, still pretty, makeup minimal, voice calm, seems lonely but defiant. How dare you, I thought without moving my mouth. You may notice the weather. You do not own the sky. I closed the diary, walked to the sink, and washed my cup until the sound of water waked whatever part of me sits on a porch and counts back from 10. Then I carried the diary to the bedroom mirror. I put it on the dresser and looked at us both, my face with its resident lines, the book with its chosen ones. I can use you without becoming you, I said aloud, which is a sentence a woman of my age might embroider if she had more time for thread. On my desk, I keep a small stack of blank cards I write on when I want to think before I speak. I wrote 3 questions and 1 promise. Questions. Who pays the blog beyond this slip? How do they decide which stories bloom? What would happen if the right people heard the right sentence in the right room? Promise. I will not raise my voice. I will raise the receipts. I called the bank my mother loved because my mother taught me where to go when men in rooms don't listen. Hypothetically, I asked the woman who answered, if a neighborhood association were depositing funds into a media account under Flowers and Safety, could a resident request a letter confirming dates without naming names? She paused, then said carefully, we don't discuss accounts, but a community member can ask if the bank would accept a preservation notice for records related to a public meeting, meaning, invite the bank to the room where people speak carefully. I thanked her the way you thank people who speak in the dialect of boundaries, then texted my friend who reads bylaws for dessert. Can I record Q&A if they invite the community? She wrote back, check your state. In ours, if it's open to the public, you can record without consent as long as you're not trespassing or interfering. I printed the statute and slid it under the diary like a foundation. I returned to the index. Next to a man's name I recognized from the comments section, she had written, likes gadgets, will volunteer to set up mic. And next to the blog owner's name, she had drawn a little crown. People crown each other when they cannot find a mirror big enough to stop them. The calendar for this week had, of course, 2 entries, teaser and bloom. I traced them with the back of my fingernail. Teaser, check on neighbors at number 24. Bloom, interview with safety advocate, keep anonymous. Anonymous meant her. The bloom would be the Q&A where she could shift her voice into policy. I could place a B right there. In the pocket behind the back cover, I found something I hadn't expected. A page torn from a spiral notebook, folded twice, soft as fabric. When I opened it, I saw my name again, and then, in parentheses, my husband's. If E resists, approach him with language about legacy and respectability. He carries shame about father's drinking. He will respond to the word order. Offer him off-ramp, separation, as dignity. The line was surgical. It had cut exactly where a healed scar lies thin. I carried the page to the kitchen and laid it next to the deposit slip and the calendar like 3 seasons of the same storm. Then I opened a new note on my phone titled Exhibit A, Mercy, and typed, you do not get to dress my pain in your vocabulary. I took a walk around the block to see the street like someone who had never lived there. The magnolia had thrown petals like silk. A child's chalk hopscotch waited for feet to dare. The houses looked like the drawings we make of houses when we're little. Square, window, door, triangle roof. She had turned this place into a theater, and she had given herself the lead. There is a way to end a play without shouting from the audience. You stand, and you walk to the stage, and you read the lines that were supposed to be whispered. Back home, I packed a tote, diary, copies of the 3 most important pages, printed statute about recording, a pen that didn't leak, and a notebook that did not pretend to be anything but blank. I added a lipstick my daughter sends me every Mother's Day because when you go to war with people who love optics, it helps to look like you slept. My husband watched from the doorway. Where are you going? He asked. To buy a cake, I said, retrieving the crumble from the fridge, and to return this reputable poison to its owner. At her door, I rang and waited. She opened with the face of a person who believes every knock is applause. Oh, I worried you didn't like it. I don't, I said pleasantly. I can't trust an ingredient list I didn't write. She smiled, unsure if she should be offended. You're funny. No, I said. I'm precise. I placed the Tupperware in her hands. And thorough. Her eyes flicked to the tote on my shoulder. Heading out? The community Q&A, I said. You'll be there, I imagine. Probably, she said lightly. I like to be helpful. I walked away before she could ask anything else, because sometimes the kindest thing you can do to a person who arranges your life is deny them a meeting. At the coffee shop, I didn't sit. I asked for a receipt with the time stamped, then walked to the corkboard where lost cats and piano lessons share ambition. A flyer announced the Q&A with a clip art megaphone. I took a photo not because paper disappears, but because people pretend it does. By evening, the room filled the way guilt does, quietly, on rubber soles. Volunteers tested the mic. He was there, beard undecided, smiling at the equipment like it might award him. She floated, her blouse the color of a field you see from a train. I sat near the aisle with my tote zipped and my face registered to appear neutral. My phone recorded from my lap. I did not need to catch everything. I needed to catch the sentence a court would recognize as a key. He began with jokes. She followed with a blessing for our safe, close-knit community, the kind of sentence that allows you to install a fence around someone else's throat. Then the questions came, choreographed, and then not. How do we talk about suspicious behavior without sounding unkind? A woman asked, eyes soft. He gestured to her. That's a good one. She leaned toward the mic and chose her phrasing like jewelry. We never invent, she said. We share what we notice. And sometimes, she glanced toward me as if checking the mirror, we amplify for awareness. It's not about shaming, it's about prevention. Amplify for awareness, I wrote, underlining twice. People love a justification that clicks. A man near the back asked about the blog's ads. He sounded like someone who pays attention to the way numbers prefer to be alone. Do sponsors influence content? He asked. They keep the lights on, the blogger said. We're a service. And the flowers and safety memo line? I asked, meeting his eyes like a person who isn't here to be invited. His eyebrows rose. She shot him an electric glance so quick I could have missed it if I hadn't been electrified myself. He said, we accept community support, as if nouns were blankets. And if a post hurts a neighbor's marriage? I asked in a voice I chose on purpose, one size lower than accusation and one size higher than whisper. Who takes responsibility? We don't control how people read, she said smoothly. We just present. I brought a presentation, I said. From my tote, I took 3 copies of 3 pages and placed them on the table in front of me, then held up the diary without showing the cover so the room wouldn't be trained to look at the gold initial and pause. Here's a schedule, I said softly. Teaser and Bloom. Here is a deposit slip from the same week. Memo, flowers and safety. And here is a contingency list with the sentence, I'm merely a conduit. I'd like to understand why a conduit chooses targets. A human hush is the opposite of applause. It holds its breath and waits for language to earn its oxygen. She didn't look at the papers. She looked at the room, which is what she's good at. We all want what's best, she began, moving toward her favorite plank. Sometimes we err on the side of caution. I heard amplify for awareness, I said. Is that the same as exaggerate? Her mouth made a small O at the verb I'd set down. If I emphasize, it's for safety. Whose? I asked. The blogger stepped closer to the mic, voice thin. We can't litigate every post, he said. If you have concerns, email. I have receipts, I said, because we were in public and the word has a fragrance. He laughed, a sound that broke like cheap glass. We're done taking questions, he announced. No, said a woman in the second row whose porch I had admired for years. We haven't asked ours yet. I did not smile. You can ruin a victory by celebrating before the field is clear. I stopped recording when the room began to turn its head instead of its cheek. Then I packed the diary away. My tote felt heavier, not because paper had gained weight, but because my spine had. On the walk home, the magnolia had made a new mess of beauty. A breeze lifted the petals and set them down elsewhere, the way stories travel when people unhook them from their hooks. Back at my table, I set everything where it could look at me. Diary, slip, calendar. I wrote a sentence on one of the blank cards and placed it on top, not as a threat, but as a thesis. You chose the wrong narrator. By the time the sun found the kitchen tile, I'd sorted my anger into labeled piles the way other people sort coupons. On the counter, the diary, the deposit slip to MB Media with flowers and safety grinning like a lie in Sunday clothes, the calendar with teaser and Bloom. I brewed coffee for courage and called the bank using the name my mother's banker had given me yesterday like a breadcrumb. Ms. Hart, the manager said, voice steady, how can I help? I'm attending a community Q&A about the safety posts on a local blog, I said. There may be deposits tied to those posts from a neighborhood pool. I won't ask for account details, but will the bank accept a preservation letter and, if needed, confirm that deposits with a certain memo exist in a date range? We can accept a preservation request tied to a public meeting, she said. We can also provide a general confirmation that deposits matching a memo were made during a period without divulging balances or owners. Written request, please, and if there's a recording, save it. I intend to, I said, and felt my spine take attendance. My brother arrived with coffee and the kind of hug men give when they didn't learn the word soften. He set a bag on the table, biscuits that tasted like the word stay. Saw the flyer, he said. You going tonight? I am, I said. And I'm bringing a mirror. I tapped the diary. He grimaced. She's been under my skin since she turned my plate number into a sermon. He took out his phone. I got something else by accident. Last night the blog guy butt-dialed me. My number is near another E in his contacts. My voicemail caught 37 seconds. He pressed play. Cafe hiss. His voice. 5 o'clock banner. Check on neighbors. Schedule the bloom after dinner. Then hers. Lower. Push the car photo. Say, silver sedan. Late hour. Don't name the house. People already know. He answered. We'll nudge. Awareness. A clink of cups. Laughter that didn't locate a face. I put a finger on the screen as if I could notch time. Forward it, I said, and keep the original. You want me there? Yes. 3rd row. Citizen, not brother. He nodded. He has always been good at ordinary heroism. After he left, my husband came in wearing his decision face. I called my brother, he said. He can take me in for a while. I suppose he can, I said, keeping my hands on paper so I wouldn't put them on him. But here's something first. I played the butt dial. When the laugh landed, he flinched. It could be out of context, he said, generosity trying to bench press proof. It could, I said. If context acquits them, they can present it. I set the deposit slip by his hand. Money tells the same story their mouths do. He sat. I don't know how to be a man who ignored the wrong person, he said. I only know how to be a man who pretends not to see. Try being a man who stays until the end of the meeting, I said. Then choose. He nodded, small. I'll stay. The word landed like a nail driven true. I texted my friend who finds comfort in statutes. Need a preservation letter, I wrote. She sent a template. I filled in dates, the memo line, the Q&A, and the sentence a judge could hum, without prejudice to privacy. I printed too and signed with the calm of someone finally wearing her own handwriting. At noon, I walked to the bank. The manager stamped my letter. If the Q&A references deposits, we can state whether deposits matching that memo occurred in the last quarter, she said. That's all I need, I said. Truth doesn't require embroidery, just witnesses. Outside, the day had the brightness of errands done correctly. I bought a sheet cake with plain frosting and asked the decorator to write, "Thank you for your honesty." Words weigh more when they sit on sugar. At home, I staged my bag, diary, 3 photocopies, calendar, deposit slip, contingencies, the preservation letter, the recording statute, my phone and a charger, the cake. I changed into a blouse that says adult and pinned my mother's brooch like a citation. By 5, my brother texted, inside, 3rd row, aisle. A photo followed. The blogger at the mic, her at his shoulder, lipstick ready to do some lifting. I loved my age for teaching me not to be intimidated by other people's mirrors. I arrived with 10 minutes to spare and sat where sound travels fairly. The room hummed with the vanity of the word community. The blogger opened with a next-door joke. She followed with, "We're here out of love," and I began recording. Hands shot up. "How do I tell if a neighbor's guest is suspicious?" one asked. "What counts as late night?" Another. She answered with a recipe. "Start with concern. Stir in observation. Bake at 350 degrees of plausible deniability." I waited for the seam where form and admission touch. "Can you outline your process?" I asked when the rhythm allowed. "From noticing to posting?" "Of course," she said, smile lacquered. "We receive reports, remove identifying information, post general concerns to raise awareness." "And if you coordinate timing with deposits marked flowers and safety?" I asked. Gasps are rude and useful, the room inhaled. "Do you disclose sponsorship?" The blogger gripped the stand. "We accept support for initiatives. Ads are labeled. Content is separate." "Like this?" I held up the calendar. "Teaser Monday, Bloom Thursday, the same week as this?" I lifted the deposit slip. Numbers redacted. Memo intact. Murmurs shook their small bells. She checked the ceiling for angels. She leaned into the edge. "Sometimes, to keep people safe, we emphasize patterns." "Emphasize is a kind word for stretch," I said. "How far until it snaps?" Numbers Eyes Man raised his hand. "Is the blog pay to scare?" he asked. Whispers unrolled like ribbon. "No one pays for fear," the blogger said. "People support outreach." "If it's outreach," I said, "why does your diary label neighbors as targets?" I didn't wave the book. I let the word do the work. Lights blink in their sockets when a fuse complains. "We don't keep diaries," she said coolly. "Good," I said. Then you won't miss this one. I slid the contingency page copy down the row. I'm merely a conduit. Your handwriting likes that sentence. The line moved hand to hand like winter air through a summer rumor. This is becoming adversarial, the blogger tried. The laugh he added fell flat. That happens, I said, when harm meets its outline. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. There was enough story in the room. The moderator called a short break. My husband touched my elbow. They're slippery, he whispered. But it's not nothing. It's enough for the next step, I said. We ask a neutral to hold the candle. During the break, the bank manager slipped in the back. Blue blazer, calm eyes. She raised her hand when we reconvened. I'm from the bank, she said. In the last quarter, deposits with the memo, Flowers and Safety, were made to an account serving media advertising. We can attest to dates upon lawful request. No balances, no names. The room adjusted its weight on one chair. The blogger swallowed. She didn't. Thank you, I said. I'll file the request tomorrow. People filed out in the hush that follows seeing something that won't be easily unseen. At the door, she leaned toward me as if we were two women sharing a secret over scarves. That diary is private property, she murmured. Return it. It's lost property, I said. I'll return it with notes. Her smile tightened, like a zip tie. You won't like how this feels when it swings back. Neither will you, I said. Difference is, mine will be truth coming home. At home, my husband didn't pretend to fix anything. He poured 2 glasses of water and sat. I'll sleep here, he said. On the couch if you want. I want you in the bed, I said. Not because we're fine, because you're not a rumor. He nodded, the embarrassment of decent men learning where they stood running pink across his face. I backed up the audio, saved it twice, and sent the preservation letter by email. I CC'd the moderator requesting the full Q&A recording for Community Archive. Then I slept because sleep is a tool, not a treat. Morning returned with its clipboard. At 10, the bank's general confirmation arrived by email, crest heavy enough to leave an indentation when printed. Between dates, deposits bearing the memo Flowers and Safety were made to an account servicing media advertising. Dates available upon formal inquiry. I printed 2 copies. Air shifted a degree toward bearable. The doorbell rang. She stood there, hair perfect. Behind her, the blogger in a suit, trying to look consulted. Let's resolve this neighbor to neighbor, she said. You have something of mine. I have something of ours, I said. It landed by my roses. It concerns the street. I stepped aside. Come in. There's cake. On the table, cake, the diary, my 3 photocopies, the bank letter with its crest. I handed plates because rituals matter. Before we begin, I said, listen. The butt dial played its 37 seconds. Silence grew furniture. That could be anyone, he said too fast. Quality is poor. It's you, I said gently, and her, and a schedule that matches your teaser and bloom. I placed the bank letter by his fork. Your outreach has a memo. Your memo has a date. Your date has a post. You misunderstand the heart, she said, setting down her fork like a delicate weapon. We do this because we care. You do this because you can, I said. Care would have knocked on my door before it knocked me down in public. You were defensive, she said. We tried subtlety. You tried architecture, I said. You built a rumor with a porch and invited the neighborhood to sit. I slid the diary toward her. You dropped this. I'm returning it. I kept copies of the pages that concern me and funds labeled Flowers and Safety. Tonight I'll present them to neighbors, not to your blog. You can't, the blogger began. I can, I said. You taught me the rules. Community means we ask in the open. My husband cleared his throat. I'll be there, he told them. The whole time. She stood. You're making a mistake, she said softly. I know, I said. For months. Today is correction. At the door she paused. People will hate you, she said, hoping the sentence would house me. People will hate you for less, I said. I preferred different math. When they left, I cut the cake for the first 3 who'd need it. My husband, my brother, and the neighbor with numbers' eyes. I printed one more thing. The last line of her contingency page. I'm merely a conduit, and taped it inside my purse. Rivers flood, bridges hold. By 6 the street gathered, lawn chairs and opinions in tow. I set the diary on a borrowed music stand, clipped the bank letter to a board, loaded the audio into 3 devices, and put a small card by the cake. Thank you for your honesty. As the sun grazed the roofs, our block turned itself into a room. I stepped forward, not because I like microphones, but because I dislike being narrated by other people. Before we talk, I said, please eat. Sugar lowers the volume on shame. Laughter, small, human, rose and sat. Then I began, not with accusation, but with chronology, the way you tell a story when you want it to stand after you've sat down. I have learned that justice arrives in ordinary clothing: a folding chair, a clipboard, a plate of store-bought cookies pretending to be hospitality. At 6:30, our cul-de-sac looked like a church picnic that had lost the hymn sheet, neighbors carrying lawn chairs, children orbiting scooters, a Labrador who believed every hand was a treaty. The blogger dragged an extension cord like a leash. She adjusted her blouse and the wind agreed not to embarrass her. I set the diary on a borrowed music stand beside a simple corkboard. On it, a printed calendar page labeled Teaser, Bloom, the bank's letter with the crest, and a blank sheet for names of those who wanted copies for the record. "Let's keep it friendly," the moderator said, a man who loves the word reasonable because it excuses him from choosing. He tapped the mic. It squealed like a conscience. "Tonight is about safety and communication." I kept my tote zipped and my expression mild, the way a saint might look right before she flips a table. They opened with a recitation of numbers: how many porch packages had been rescued, how many missing cats had been found, how many suspicious sedans had turned out to be relatives. "Sometimes," the blogger said, the mic polishing his consonants, "we err on the side of caution." "How do you define err?" I asked, "and how do you measure the side?" A friendly titter ran along the lawn like a sprinkler. Then the neighbor with numbers' eyes lifted his hand. "Disclosure," he said. "If money moves, we should see the shoes it buys." The blogger smiled the way one smiles before stepping into an elevator, hoping the doors will close. "We take community support for outreach," he said. "Content decisions are independent." She leaned in, adding sugar. "We try to keep people safe without pointing fingers." I stepped forward, not to grandstand, but to refuse the position of audience. "This is a calendar for safety posts," I said, holding up the photocopy. "Teaser on Monday, Bloom on Thursday. It matches the week my marriage became a public art project." The page fluttered once in the breeze and then behaved. "This is a bank letter confirming deposits bearing the memo Flowers and Safety into an account servicing media advertising. The dates match the calendar." A hush is noisy when people are recalculating their loyalties. "We can't be expected to account for every coincidence," the blogger replied, laugh thin. "I don't believe in coincidence when it passes for payroll," I said, and set both pages on the corkboard with pushpins that felt like punctuation. "What I want is simple: an acknowledgement of method, a correction of harm, a promise that awareness won't keep breaking ribs while asking us to clap." She pointed at the diary with a manicured forefinger. "That is private. It was dropped in my yard, and its contents are public purpose," I said. "But you can have it back after we read a few lines aloud, so the community can decide if the author knows the difference between concern and control." I opened to the page titled Contingencies and read, "If challenged, use phrases: we worry, best interest, community standards." I heard, "It may be nothing." Deflect to blog policy. "If legal, I'm merely a conduit." "Mir is doing a lot of work," Numbers' eyes murmured, and something like agreement moved through the chairs. She tried a different face, hurt. "I have dedicated time to sick neighbors, to lost pets, to funerals. I am not a villain. If sometimes I emphasize, it is to get attention for safety." "Emphasize," I repeated. "Stretch, inflate, which word fits you best?" The blogger stepped between us with a smile meant for donors. "Let's not turn this into a trial." "Trials record," I said. "I'm asking for something harder, that you hear yourself." My phone, recording in my lap, watched the trees. The evening light had chosen to be kind. Across the cul-de-sac, a child's chalk galaxy wobbled where a tire had scuffed it. "If we keep siding with safety as a brand," I said, "we stop noticing whether the product is fear." A teenager, hers, sidled near the folding table of cookies, picking at a napkin as if it might become a flag. He looked at his mother, then at me, and then quickly away. Even children know when a costume doesn't fit. The moderator cleared his throat. "We're drifting," he said. "Let's focus on the blog's process." "Good," I said. "Process is my favorite color." I lifted the calendar again. Teaser, Bloom, paired with specific deposits, followed by posts that suggest without saying, accuse without naming, and hurt without leaving fingerprints. I set it down. "When you wrote, wife at 24, husband receptive to shame, you weren't protecting—" "I never wrote that," she snapped, anger finally removing its cardigan. "Your diary did," I said calmly, and read the line aloud. The entry is initialed with your full first name on the cover, your habit of drawing molars on the loop of your Y on every other page, and your rose petal bookmark still smells like your lotion. We can do handwriting analysis, but that feels insulting to everyone's eyes. I didn't move toward her. She moved back anyway. The blogger made a show of generosity. If mistakes were made, they weren't malicious, he said. We're volunteers. The harm isn't tax deductible just because you didn't cash a salary, I said. Did you hear the bank letter? An account servicing media advertising. I'm sure you have a good explanation. I'd love to hear it in full sentences. He lifted his chin. Ads don't influence editorial. We provide a service. She put a hand on his arm. We also rely on community reports. We don't make things up. The neighbor with the Labrador spoke up, the dog panting an amen. But you prioritize, right? Which reports become teaser, which become bloom. That's editorial judgment, the blogger said, relief flashing, terrain he liked. Then judge this, I said, and pressed play on my brother's voicemail. The tiny speaker produced the cafe hiss, the line, 5 o'clock banner, check on neighbors, schedule the bloom after dinner. Her voice followed. Push the car photo. Say, silver sedan, late hour. Don't name the house. People already know. His answer, will nudge, awareness. No one coughed. A bird invented its own excuse and flew away. That could be anything, she said too quickly. It is exactly what it sounds like, I said. And you know it because you are good at knowing what things sound like. The moderator's voice rose into authority, a register he uses to end debates where fairness threatens to do work. We are not here to shame anyone, he said. We will continue the Q&A next week with ground rules. Tonight is adjourned. A murmur lifted. People hate leaving a story when the verb just showed up. Adjourn after one question, Numbers Eyes said, standing. Did you or did you not coordinate content with deposits from a fund labeled Flowers and Safety? He pronounced each syllable as if it had applied for citizenship. The blogger swallowed. Community support arrives when stories resonate, he said, which isn't an answer in any language I respect. She took the mic. We report what we see. We are not responsible for people's marriages. I'm responsible for mine, my husband said aloud, so that the room had to update its map. And I allowed your tone to tell me what to think. That's on me. But you built the stage. A woman from the book club, one who still uses thank you notes made of paper, stood with the kind of moral clarity people mistake for cruelty. You used us, she said to the diarist. You used our concern to move your stories. That isn't neighborly. She lifted her chin. If I didn't keep standards, this block would decline. Standards are good, I said, but your standard is obedience to your narrative. You've benefited from mine, she said, voice brittle. People sent casseroles when your mother died because I told them to. People would have baked without your permission, I said. We know how to be kind without a master of ceremonies. A man in a baseball cap, not an ally of mine in any known election, lifted his hand. My business lost clients when the blog ran that local contractor cuts corners piece, he said. Was that a bloom too? The blogger looked at his shoes. We share reports, he said, softer now, realizing he was not a king, only a vendor. I took a breath and laid down the next card. I propose we vote on 2 items, I said. First, to ask a neutral third party to audit any fund that is paid for content under the banner of safety. Second, to adopt a policy. No more teaser, bloom, without verifiable police or official notices. And any paid placement must be disclosed above the fold. The moderator objected. Tradition, process, committees. But the room had already decided to be a room. Hands rose, voices counted. Majority, majority. The Labrador barked once and sat like a seal. We should also request the full recording of last night's Q&A, Numbers Eyes added, for the archive, and copies of any contracts between the blog and advertisers labeled Community, the book club woman said. The list wrote itself on a whiteboard someone had brought, just in case. I want to live in a neighborhood where people bring whiteboards to hard conversations. The blogger tried one last time. You're taking away a resource, he said. People will be less safe. Truth doesn't make us less safe, I said. Only the version that thinks panic is a public service. She set her jaw. If you want to bring this to court, we'll win, she declared. I have texts. I have allies. I have years of service. Judges love service. Court is not a threat, I said quietly. It's a room with a stenographer. She laughed, the bright broken kind. You're enjoying this. No, I said. I'm surviving it with style. The vote ended. The moderator scrawled the results. Audit. yes. Disclosure policy, yes. Pause on teaser Bloom until new guidelines, yes. The room exhaled like a lung that had been told to hold its breath for months and had finally remembered it didn't have to. When people began to fold chairs, always the truest sign of a decision, she strode over to me, voice low enough to look private. You think you've won? She said. But people forget. In 3 months they'll be bored. I'll still be here. So will I said. The difference is, I'll have less to carry. Her son hovered at her elbow. Mom, he said gently, teenager suddenly fathering. She flinched as if the word had touched a burn. For 1 second I saw the woman underneath, the one who had learned early that control feels like oxygen when no one taught you breathing. The blogger slunk toward the extension cord. Numbers' eyes intercepted him. Send me the sponsorship ledger, he said, or the bank will send what it legally can. Up to you which version of this story you want to be in. People will unsubscribe, the blogger muttered, as if that were a synonym for famine. People will unsubscribe from panic, Numbers' eyes said. Maybe they'll subscribe to each other. I packed my tote. My husband lifted the music stand, an act so mundane it felt like a vow. What now? He asked. Cake, I said, and rest, and tomorrow, letters. I looked across the street to her porch light, which had come on out of habit. Habit is a powerful religion. At home, I sliced the cake. We ate standing up, the way you do when victory is too small for dishes and too big for denial. My brother texted a single word, ready. I sent back, soon. I sat at the table and wrote 3 thank yous by hand. 1 to Numbers' eyes, 1 to the book club woman, and 1 to the bank manager. Then I printed a sign for our porch. We speak directly. It looked like decor. It felt like a treaty. The doorbell rang again. I expected fury. I found apology. Thin, conditional, offered by proxy. The moderator held his hat. I'm sorry, he said. I should have seen earlier. Seeing is an exercise, I said. You can start now. Help with the audit. He nodded. I will. He hesitated, then asked, Do you want to chair the policy committee? I want to live, I said, smiling. But I'll write the first draft. After he left, I went to the bedroom and set the diary on the dresser. You can go back tomorrow, I told it, with a note. I tucked a card inside the back cover, a single sentence I had earned. You mistook volume for virtue. In the mirror, I could see our bed, my husband sitting at its edge, hands folded like prayer without guilt. He looked up. I don't want to be the man who needed a crowd to tell him his wife was telling the truth, he said. But I was. I'm sorry. Me too, I said, because sorrow is communal, even when it's ethical. Here are my conditions. I said them slowly. Counseling with someone who understands reputation and control. Public correction where public harm was done, and no more decisions that begin with how it looks. He agreed without haggling. Some contracts don't need a lawyer. They need a pen you both hold. Before sleep, I opened the diary to the last page again, the one where she had written, If someone gets hurt, it won't be my fault. I'm just passing along what I hear. I wrote beneath it in my own hand, soft enough not to tear, Passing along is choosing. I slid the diary into a padded envelope addressed to her, stamped it, and set it by the door. On the flap, I wrote, Returned with community edits. From the kitchen, the refrigerator sighed. Outside, the Labrador's collar jingled a lullaby. Across the way, her porch light clicked off. Habit ends when it gets tired enough. I crawled into bed and lay on my back, palms open. My husband reached over, not to own, but to ask. I placed my hand in his and felt something small but correct calibrate. In the morning, there would be bank forms and audit emails and a meeting about policy where words like transparent and consent would sit next to cookies on a red plastic plate. There would be people who stopped waving and people who started. There would be a boy who had watched his mother learn the difference between influence and authority and who might remember it later when someone asked him to nudge a truth. There would be a blogger who had to decide whether to sell ads that did not break bones. For tonight, there was quiet, and in the quiet, a sentence. I will not be narrated. I will narrate. And in the space between those two promises, I slept like a woman who had finally found her voice register. Not louder, just true. Morning wore yesterday's perfume, paper, sugar, and the after sound of a vote. I brewed coffee and lined up my 3 proofs like saints at a small altar. The diary's calendar, teaser, Bloom, the bank's letter with its crisp crest, and the 37-second voicemail that said more than many sermons. I added the new policy draft I'd written after midnight, 5 sentences, no embroidery, and a list of names who'd asked for copies. When I finished, my kitchen felt less like a room and more like a newsroom that had decided to be kind. By 9, the bank manager called. "We've received your preservation letter and the community's request," she said. "Within our limits, we can provide a short form confirming date and memo correlations. No balances or account identities, of course." "That's all I need," I said. "We're building a bridge, not a prison." She laughed lightly. "Bridges hold," she said. "I'll email by noon." I thanked her and turned to the envelope waiting on the hall table. The diary, padded and addressed, the flap already sealed with the sentence I had earned, returned with community edits. I added a note inside, short and legible. "I am returning what you dropped in my yard. We will keep the pages that concern us. Passing along is choosing." I had intended to leave it at her door like a gentle verdict. Instead, I set it aside. Some returns deserve witnesses. My husband came into the kitchen and stood, hands in his pockets, like a boy whose report card had been an essay in defense. "I canceled the call to my brother," he said. "I told him I'd be at the house, helping with the audit, and that if he wanted to support the marriage, he should bring snacks to the committee like a civilized ally." "Good," I said, surprised by how easily good fit in my mouth. He cleared his throat. "I called the blogger," he added, a small wince arriving with the confession. "I told him I'd comment publicly when the policy draft goes up. I'll name the harm and the correction. I owe you that. I owe the block that. You owe yourself that," I said. "You've been living under borrowed narrative. It's heavy." He nodded, and that was the closest he came to crying. "You learn to read men by the way they don't." At noon, the bank email arrived. The letter wore its crest like decorum, and just enough words to survive inquiry. During the period, dates, deposits bearing the memo, flowers and safety, were made to an account servicing media advertising. This letter confirms timing only and does not disclose account owners, balances, or any other confidential information. Simple, neutral, damning by arithmetic. I printed 3 copies and slipped each into a plastic sleeve because some facts deserve raincoats. We had set the follow-up gathering for 6 o'clock, the same sidewalk theater as last night, but with fewer speeches and more documents. Before that, I walked the cake carrier across the street, rang, and waited. She opened with a smile as tight as a braid. "Back so soon?" she said, a tone that hoped a joke could be architecture. "I brought your diary," I said, lifting the envelope as if it weren't full of a person's engine. "And the crumble container." I handed them both to her, then stepped back 1/2 step so we had the kind of space where truth breathes. She didn't invite me in. "You kept copies," she said, not asking. "Yes," I said, "only of the pages that concerned me and the neighborhood. You are free to deny the handwriting in public. That is your right. But I suspect your rose lotion bookmark will testify." Her eyes flicked to the envelope flap, reading the sentence I'd written there. "Passing along is choosing," she murmured, as if tasting a seasoning. "And so is stopping," I said. "Tonight we'll present the bank's timing letter and the policy draft to retire teaser Bloom unless a public notice exists. You are welcome to attend, or you can rest. Either would be neighborly." She took a breath that sounded like a sore muscle. "You won't drop this, will you?" "I did," I said, smiling just enough to be polite. "Right on your porch." I walked away before she could decide whether that was funny. Vindication doesn't gratify me anymore. Correction does. Back home, I called my friend, the one who frames bylaws like family photos. "We're presenting a draft tonight," I said. 5 points. Disclose sponsors. No teaser. Bloom absent official notice. Appeals go to a rotating 3-person panel. Preservation letters auto-sent when safety funds touch content. And a cooling-off rule. If an item mentions neighbors without names, it waits 24 hours to ensure anyone concerned has also knocked. "That's clean," she said. "I'll stand behind it with my mild librarian smile and a statute in my pocket." I hung up and wrote 2 index cards for myself, not as a script, but as rails. On the first, 3 words, short, plain, verifiable. On the second, my sentence, the one I would bury under the dais like a cornerstone: "Dignity doesn't shout, it underlines." At 5:30, Numbers Eyes texted, "I ran the IP headers on the blog's last 4 concern posts. 2 came from the same cafe, same day as the deposit dates. The others came from her Wi-Fi." I printed screenshots. He added a sticker of a magnifying glass, which made me love our ridiculous species. "Bring them," I replied. "We'll use them carefully. Proof should never feel like entertainment." When I stepped outside with my tote and a second cake, because repetition makes civil society, Our little street had already organized itself. Folding chairs, yes, but also a card table with pens, a pitcher of water, and a sign-up sheet headed, "We volunteer to be adults." Someone had thought to bring a trash bag for paper plates. A child had chalked a new border around the galaxy, so bikes would respect it. The Labrador napped under the fig tree as if democracy were an old friend. The blogger had not brought his extension cord. He stood on his porch, arms folded, calculating how absence performs. She arrived late, on purpose. Her blouse was the color of an alibi. She didn't sit, neither did I. The moderator cleared his throat. "We reconvene," he said, like a judge who had learned softness. "We have letters, we have a draft, we have fewer jokes." A gentle laugh rustled. We all appreciated the limit. I held up the bank letter, plastic sleeve catching the light. "Timing," I said. "It doesn't accuse, it arranges." I handed copies down the aisle. Then I placed the diary's calendar beside it so the columns could look at each other like cousins who had not yet admitted they favored the same grandparent. She stood, chin lifted. "You continue to violate my privacy," she said, even as the street read. "You keep dropping it on our lawns," I said. "We're just mowing." Numbers Eyes presented his headers, carefully, with caveats. "Not conclusive," he said, "but suggestive. The cafe matches the butt dial. The home network location aligns with the IP footprints. We can ask the blog host for logs if the owner consents. If not, we can subpoena, but I'd rather keep this under pies." The blogger stayed silent. Somewhere in the back, the book club woman murmured, "Pies are expensive." We all knew what she meant. I passed the policy draft to the front row. 5 bullet points, the kind of English that respects Tuesdays. The moderator read it aloud. When he finished, hands sprouted like arguments. "Add no anonymous quotes," someone said. "Require disclaimers on speculation," said another. "Make the appeal panel half people with kids, half people with none," said a third. And we laughed because fairness can be oddly specific. We adopted 2 of the 3 suggestions. I felt the shape of the street change under my feet. She stepped forward. "You're turning a resource into a bureaucracy," she said. "We'll be too slow to help. People will get hurt." "People are already hurt," I said. "We're just done calling the bruise blush." I kept my voice low because I'm trying not to enjoy myself. She opened her mouth for a retort and then closed it. Sometimes the tongue recognizes it has run out of jurisdiction. I could have ended there. Adoption, applause, cake, but harm deserves its ledger. "One more item," I said. "We've asked for an audit of any money labeled for flowers, condolence, or safety that touched media. Volunteers?" Hands rose. Numbers Eyes. The book club woman. The teenager with the napkin. My husband. "We'll meet Saturday," I said. "Bring calculators and kindness." A man in a baseball cap, the contractor from last night, lifted his hand. "I brought an invoice from the safety series," he said. "They charged me a small business rate to clarify concerns after the Post accused my staff of cutting corners. The memo says, community placement. I didn't want to pay. They said it was for the neighborhood." He unfolded a photocopy. The total wasn't small. The blogger finally found his voice. "We provide remediation services," he said weakly. It was the sentence of a man realizing he doesn't sell news. He sells exits from fires he helps fan. "Stop," she muttered to him. Too late and too soft. I had a choice then. Pile on or lay down the line that separates justice from vengeance. I chose the line. "No more invoices," I said. "No more remediation. If you've collected for community placement, return it. If you don't, we will pursue small claims on behalf of payers, and we will not be alone." The teenager looked at his mother, a look children give when their parents finally hear the register change in a room they thought they ran. He nodded once. She pretended it was at a bird. I decided I would like that boy forever. We voted the draft into policy. We voted the audit committee into existence. We voted to tell the blog host to pause safety posts until the disclosures were built and the audit concluded. Hands up, down, count, majority, yes. Paperwork transforms neighborhoods because it makes memory behave. We could have dispersed then, but I had one last act. Simple, theatrical, earned. I lifted the padded envelope with the diary inside. "This is yours," I told her. "I'm giving it back surrounded by the people you wrote about, because privacy turns evil when it starts thinking it's an excuse." She stepped forward to take it. I did not let go immediately. "There's a sentence on the flap," I said. "Read it before you open." She glanced down. Her mouth made an O again, but not the kind from last night. "Returned with community edits," she read, barely audible. Make your own corrections, I said. We have ours. I released the envelope. It felt like letting go of a rope I didn't know I'd been holding until the fibers left my hand. Neighbors drifted toward cake. My husband stood beside the music stand in that quiet way men do when they are learning how to be useful without performing usefulness. The blogger stayed on his porch, diminished, still calculating. She held the envelope like an animal that might bite, then pressed it to her ribs and went inside without another word. The Labrador yawned, then settled into what looked very much like relief. Dusk unbuttoned the day. Children drew stars over the old chalk galaxy, layering bright over scuff. I sat on our front step and watched the porch lights bloom, this time not as accusations, but as lamps being exactly what they are. People came by to thank me, to apologize, to volunteer recipes for policy. Neighbors are saints when you give them something better than panic to worship. Numbers Eyes left the IP printouts with me. For the file, he said. The book club woman squeezed my hand with the unforgiving kindness of the righteous. The contractor handed me his invoice copy with relief and a half smile. I'll bring a power drill Saturday, he said, for the whiteboard. When the chairs finally folded and the street relearned its nighttime posture, I went inside and set the plastic sleeves in a shallow drawer. I labeled the folder Truth, Q1. Another would come, Truth, Q2. That's how life works if you're lucky. You get quarters where paperwork keeps up with your days. My husband poured tea. He sat across from me and, for the first time in months, looked like a man seated at his own table. Thank you for inviting me to be brave, he said. I misunderstood quiet for peace. Quiet is a weapon in the wrong hands, I said. In the right ones, it's a tool. I felt suddenly old and also brand new. We talked about therapy, names, a time that worked for both of us, what we would say to the counselor about shame and the ways men inherit it like furniture. We wrote a short joint statement to post when the policy went live. We trusted a tone more than a person. We were wrong. We choose repair. He read it, nodded, and didn't try to edit the verbs out of it. My phone buzzed once more. A text from an unknown number. I was wrong. No signature, only a period. I didn't need a name. The sentence was the closest she could come to contrition without closing a door she worshipped. I replied, "We'll see. Mercy opens windows. It doesn't move into the guest room on the first day." Before bed, I stood at the sink and looked at our window, and then at hers. Both were dark. In the glass, I saw my face, older, lined, alive, and behind it, the reflection of my kitchen, a room that had learned to do more than hold appliances. On the counter lay the index card I always forget to put away. Dignity doesn't shout, it underlines. I placed it in the drawer with the letters, then turned out the light. In bed, I read 2 pages of a novel where people tell the truth with dialogue that doesn't have to work this hard. Then I turned off the lamp and waited for sleep. He reached for my hand, not to claim, but to ask. I let him take it. That, too, was a policy we'd voted in. Sometime after midnight, a breeze moved through, heavy with magnolia. I dreamed about a neighborhood not ruled by notices, where porch lights meant guests and not evidence, where we returned to its original meaning. In the dream, someone passed me a diary. It was blank. I wrote the first line like an oath. We will speak directly. Morning would bring receipts and emails, audits and apologies, and a boy who would watch his mother sort her pages alone, and maybe, finally, measure herself by a different ruler. There would be a blog pivoting toward recipes and school supply drives. There would be a sign on our corkboard, subscribe to each other. There would be days when the old habits rattled their cage. And there would be my voice, which I had relocated from the small shelf where women my age are told to store it, to the table where meals and decisions are served. When the alarm pulled me to the surface, I didn't dread. I was busy. I was the person you become when you decide not to be narrated. I brushed my hair, pinned on my mother's brooch, and stepped into the kitchen like a witness entering the room where she belongs. I used to think vindication sounded like applause. It doesn't. It sounds like paper sliding into a folder with everything spelled correctly. It sounds like a neighbor clearing her throat before saying, "I was wrong," and a committee choosing the smaller word that saves the bigger future, policy. It sounds like my husband reading a statement and not trying to sand down the verbs. The street looks the same. Mailboxes, hydrangeas, a Labrador certain that treaties are edible, but it breathes differently. The blog swapped sirens for bake sales. The whiteboard shows numbers instead of opinions. People still watch each other, but now the watching has a front door. We retired Teaser and Bloom. We adopted a rule that requires knocking before narrating. Passing along became choosing, and choosing learned to sign its name. As for the woman next door, I won't make her my hobby. We gave back what belonged to her and kept what belonged to us, a record. If she rebuilds with truth, I will lend a measuring tape. If she rebuilds with fog, I will open a window. That is my promise and my boundary. At home, we practice our own repairs. Therapy is on Tuesdays. We're learning to notice when shame tries to write our sentences and to hand it a pen only when it can underline, not dictate. My marriage isn't a triumph. It's a draft with the edits visible, which is a finer kind of honesty than perfection ever offered me. Here is the moral I earned. Gossip in a soft voice still cuts, and safety used as perfume is not care. It's cover. Dignity doesn't shout. It underlines. If someone is writing your life from the curb, take back the paragraph. Bring paper. Bring witnesses. Then speak directly. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from and why you clicked this story, and if you've ever had to trade rumor for proof. Like and subscribe so these stories keep a home. Tell me your city and country so I know which porch light is yours tonight.